Okay. Let's see what we got going on here. Looks like we have a trig lecture for 10, 12, 10, 13. The student will change degree measure into radians. That's what it should say. Student will change degree measure into radians. So let's take a look at what that means. If a central angle, now remember from geometry, a central angle is an angle that has its vertex at the center of a circle. That's a central angle. And it intercepts an arc of the circle. So it says if a central angle intercepts an arc that has the same length as the radius, that means if I were to cut this arc out and straighten it out, it would be exactly the same length as the radius. That's what that means. So if the central angle intercepts an arc that has the same length as the radius, then the measure of this angle, if we were to measure this, it is said to be 1 radian. That's about 57.3 degrees, but we're going to call it 1 radian. So if this arc is the same length as this radius, then this angle is 1 radian. Okay? 2 radians would be about like this. 3 radians would be almost 180 degrees. And pi radians is exactly 180 degrees. And so that's what this says here. Note, 180 degrees is pi radians. We know radian, or we're used to degrees for measuring angles, but now we're going to measure angle using this unit of measure called the radian. Here's what roughly 1 radian looks like here. This angle would be about a radian. 360 degrees is 2 pi radians. Pi radians and 2 pi radians. Pi radians 180 degrees, 2 pi radians 360 degrees. To convert degrees to radians, which is what we're going to be doing today, we're going to multiply degrees by pi over 180. That's a fancy form of 1, really, and simplify. So here's what it's going to look like. Convert to radians, and when we get to graphing, you'll see where radians come in real handy, hopefully. Convert degrees to radians and then reduce. So I'm going to take my degrees, excuse me, negative 585 degrees. I'm going to multiply that by pi over 180. You can think of this as being negative 585 over 1 if you want to. That'll give me negative 585 pi over 180. And now I'm going to reduce. 585, I'm going to use a calculator so I don't have to think as hard. I know they'll both divide by 5, so we'll do that first. That'll reduce to 117. 180 divided by 5 equals 36. And say, hey, 7 plus 1 plus 1, that's 9. 6 plus 3 is 9. That's the rule for 9s. It's the same as the rule for 3s. If the digits of a number will add up to a number that is divisible by 9, the number itself is evenly divisible by 9. So I'm going to divide the top and bottom of this fraction by 9. 117 divided by 9 equals, that's 13. 36 divided by 9 is 4, and of course that minus sign stays there. So this, that won't reduce any further. So what I did was I said, okay, I want to change this. My instructions were to change this to radians, and the rule for changing to radians, to convert degrees to radians, we multiplied degrees by pi over 180 and simplify. So that's what I did. I multiplied it by pi over 180. I stuck a 1 under there. And so 580 pi over 585 pi over 180. It stays negative. And then I reduced this. I just started dividing it by things that I knew would go into it. I divided them both by 5 because I saw that they would easily divide by 5. Then I recognized these will both divide by 9, so I divided them both by 9. And these won't reduce any further, so that's my answer. This is negative 13 pi over 4. Some people write rads. It's radians. After a while, we'll just we can conclude that if it's in radian measure, we don't often write radians, but you can write rads if you want or something like that. So there we go. I'm going to do the same thing with this one over here. Negative 1020 degrees. I want to change it radians, so I'm going to multiply by pi over 180. If I think of this as being over 1, I can say, well, that's 1020 pi over 1 times 180 is 180. And this will remain negative. If one of them is negative, the entire thing is negative. Now I've got to reduce. Well, I can divide them both by 10 in my head, so I'm going to do that. That's 102 pi over 18. These will both divide by 3 because 2 plus 1 is 3, so this number is divisible by 3. 8 plus 1 is 9, so that is divisible by 3. If you add the digits of a number and the number is, the sum of the digits is divisible by 3, so is the number itself. So rather than make a mistake, I'm going to use my handy dandy pocket brain. 102 divided by 3 equals 34. This will stay negative. In the top I divided that by 3, and I'll divide that by 3. And these are both even, so I'm going to divide them by 2. And that will give me negative 17 pi over 3 radians. So what did we do? We were given a degree measurement, negative 1020 degrees, and we represented it in radians by multiplying by pi over 180 and simplifying. It's negative 17 pi over 3 radians. Okay. Let's see. Yay! I got the answer sheet there. We've already done. Okay, let's take a look at, I think I've got 2 more. 440 degrees. We want to convert this to radians. It's the same thing, over and over. You multiply by pi over 180. You can put a 1 under this, or think of it as having a 1 under it if you want. That'll give me 440 pi over 180. I see I can divide both of these by 10 easily, so that would be 44 pi over 18. I can divide both of these by at least 2. 22 pi over 9. And I think that's my final reduction. That won't reduce any further. So 440 degrees is 22 pi over 9 if I haven't made a mistake. Let me see if I've made a mistake. Yay! Okie dokie. That's radians, of course. Okay. And again, I just multiplied this by pi over 180 and simplified it. And this is the number of radians that 440 degrees is. 440 degrees and 22 pi over 9 radians are the same angle. Okay, and here's one. It should be fairly easy. I'm going to multiply that by pi over 180. Again, you can think of this as having a 1 under it. 60 times pi is 60 pi. 1 times 180 is 180. These will both divide by 60. If I divide this by 60, I get 1. 1 times pi is pi. If I divide this by 60, I'll get 3. So you can think of that as 1 pi over 3 or just pi over 3 radians. Okay? And that's what you're going to be doing on today's worksheet. You're going to be given a bunch of angles and converting them to radians. You'll be given them the angles in degrees, the measures of angles, I should say, in degrees. If it's negative, your answer will be negative radians. If it's negative, your answer will be in negative radians. And if the original angle measurement is positive, your answer will be positive in radians. Okay? I hope that made sense.